Hey there, Ben Jordan here. If you follow me on YouTube, you've probably watched me travel over 5,000 miles to crazy places making generative patches on this here Euroburo. However, one thing that I kind of neglected to do in that video is show you what the heck is going on. So what I'm doing right now is creating a bunch of short videos that essentially demystify the interface of the Euroburo and show you how easy it is to create, well, whatever your imagination can come up with. Enjoy. Let's make a simple subtractive synth that I can control with a portable MIDI controller. And the first thing that I'll do is plug the MIDI controller out to the Euroburo MIDI in. The left and right outputs of the Euroburo are going directly into my digital recorder. I want to create my MIDI interface right here, so I'm going to press this button. I'm going to go to Interface Modules. I'm going to go to MIDI Notes In, and then I have all these little options here. Let's go with the color yellow. Set the MIDI channel to 1, set the number of outputs to 1 since it's just going to be a monophonic synth. For the sake of this video, I'm going to be lazy and keep the velocity output off, so done. Right next to that, let's create an oscillator. I'm going to go to Audio Modules, Oscillator. I would like to create a saw, and I would like my saw to be aqua color. Just below that, I'd like to create a filter, so we could go to Audio Modules, SV Filter. Magenta is a fine color, low pass output on, and done. Now let's create an envelope for that filter. So I can go to Control Modules, ADSR. We can make the color peach. Done. By pressing these buttons, we can see exactly what they do. And so we want to go the MIDI note out to the oscillator note in, the MIDI gate out to the envelope gate in, the envelope out to the filter frequency in, the saw wave out to the filter in, and then the filter to left and right output into the digital recorder. And now we could edit the parameters of the ADSR to make it sound, I don't know, however we want. And by selecting a pre-existing connection again, we can just attenuate that output. So now the filter will be much more gentle. I'm going to add an LFO to liven up the sound of that oscillator a little bit more. And we can just select the output of the LFO to the input of the oscillator and then attenuate it very low. Speed up the vibrato. Let's actually make this sound good. I'm going to disconnect the filter out from the outputs and put an actual VCA on here. That's Audio Modules, VCA. Let's keep it red and give it 1 out. Now the filter output can go to the VCA in, and the VCA output, well, actually, let's put some reverb on this. I can select my VCA, I can hit Shift, Move, and then just move it right there. And even after moving it, everything will stay connected, so it's easy to organize things. Let's create a new module. Let's go to Effects Modules, and let's select Hall Reverb, and it will be orange. So first things first, the envelope out will also control the level of the VCA or voltage controlled amplifier. The output of the VCA will go to the reverb right and left inputs. The reverb output will naturally go to the digital recorder. If we want this saw to actually sound a little bit better and use a little bit more CPU, we could turn on duty cycling and upsampling. And now let's listen to it. I would like to make one more adjustment that would allow my dog to play this while staying in the natural minor key. So that MIDI note to oscillator connection, we're going to select that and then delete it. Then we'll create a new module down here that's a control module. It will be a quantizer. We will turn on scale key jacks and then done. MIDI note out to quantizer in, quantizer out to oscillator in. We will keep it in the key of A and then use the scale of minor natural. Let's create a random MIDI pattern sequencer on the Euroburo, which will send MIDI data to the Korg Volca FM. The output of the Korg Volca FM will go back into the Euroburo and utilize some of its effects, and then go out into the digital recorder. So for the effects portion, just so we can hear what we're working with, I'm going to go to a new page, and I'm going to name it Effects. Done. On that effects page, I'm going to create a new reverb module by pressing a button. Blue is the perfect color for that. Let's just go with Hall Reverb and done. I'm going to connect the left audio input of the Euroburo to the reverb right and left, and then the left reverb output will go to the left output of the Euroburo and the right to the right, and now we have sound. The first thing I'm going to do is create an LFO, and I'm going to go to Control Modules all the way up on top, and it's just going to be a little square wave, and you'll see it blinking. And that is our clock. I could select the right button and make that clock 140 BPM. Right next to the LFO, I'm going to select another control module and make a trigger. And that will basically just turn that LFO clock into a pure gate. Below that, I am going to create a control module that will be a clock divider. I'll connect the output of the trigger to the input of the clock divider, and now we have some options here. I could divide it by a third. I'm going to save some time by selecting this clock divider, selecting Shift Copy, and then putting it right there, the exact same thing. And this one will be a fourth. Next to each one of these dividers, I am going to create yet another trigger. The divided output can go to the trigger in on both of them. Now just below that, I'm going to create a new module, Control Modules, and I'm going to go down to Random. And one of the options I'm going to enable in Random is New Value on Trig. And let's make it a different color. How about a orange? I'm going to copy that module 2 times. The main clock trigger out can go to the trigger input of the random 1. The first divided trigger output can go into random 2. And now on time, we have 3 different random frequencies being made with each one of these triggers. I'm going to name this particular page Rand. I'm going to start another page here just to be organized that I'm going to name Quant. Unsurprisingly, on this page, I'm going to create 3 control modules that will all be quantizers. And in quantizers, we can keep the color mango, that's fine with me. I'm going to enable scale key jacks. I'm going to copy the module, going to copy the module again. Now in each one of these modules, I'm just going to set it to minor harmonic. This is my scale in the key of A. Below that, I'm going to create an interface module that will be a MIDI note out. And it will be on channel 1, and there will be no velocity output. The output of the quantizers will go to the input of the MIDI output. That sounds much more confusing than it is. Going over to our first page, the output of the randoms will be going into the quantizers. How do we do that? Well, just select that. There's the input of our quantizer. One last thing, these MIDI output modules need a gate in, and we can just do that from the triggers that we created in the beginning of this video. Now we're not hearing every one of these notes because they're triggering far outside of the Volca FM's MIDI in range, and the way that we could deal with that and sort of call that in is selecting the input of the quantizer, the output of the randomizer, and then attenuating it. And we could do that with all of these. I'm going to go to my reverb page and edit the effects a little bit. We are going to use the Euroburo to create a MIDI controllable polyphonic synthesizer. If you have not yet watched the video where I made a monophonic synthesizer using the exact same setup, I suggest you watch that first because I'm going to be skipping over some basic things. One might ask why not just plug this into a small portable digital polyphonic MIDI controllable synthesizer? And the answer to that question is extreme customization. So to stay as organized as possible, I'm going to start naming pages first. And this page will be named OSC because my oscillators will be in here. The second page will be named ENV because my envelopes will be in here for 4 of the oscillators. And the third page for now will just be called filter and maybe space MISC. So the first thing I'm going to do is select interface modules, MIDI notes in. I'm going to go with the color white I'm going to go with 4 outputs, priority newest, velocity output on, and that should be about it. And so if I play these keys, you'll see these light up. Now let's create some oscillators and let's make them all different from one another. So the first one can be a sawtooth. The second one can be a square. The third one can be a triangle. And the fourth can be, let's make another sawtooth. Let's find the MIDI note outputs from this MIDI in module down here and patch them into the voltage or note input from the oscillator. So that should be the first one here, MIDI note in. 2, 3, and 4. Now I'm going to go to the envelope page, and I'm going to go to Control Modules, and I'm going to select an ADSR. I'm just going to turn the attack all the way down and leave everything else generally pretty much the same. And then I'm going to select this and copy it and move it right down here. Copy it, move it here, done. Select this, copy it, move it here, done. Now we have 4 envelopes. So on the filter miscellaneous page, I'm going to go to Audio Module, SV Filter, create one low pass filter here, and then right next to that, I'm going to create another filter. That one can be bandpass. So I'm just going to turn on the bandpass output, turn off the low pass. So rather than creating 4 different VCAs, I think it would be more efficient to just create one mixer module. And that one mixer module can be actually voltage controlled by the envelopes. So audio mixer, I'm going to have 4 channels coming in. Panning can be turned on. The inputs will be monophonic and the color can be purple, and done. I'm actually going to copy this filter down here and then do it one more time over here. So now we have 4 filters total, 3 of which are low pass. I'm going to open up the filters about halfway for now, just so we could hear our output and make sure we're not making any mistakes. I'm going to create a new page at the end here and just title it Effects. And just like every other thing that I've made on this, I'm going to put some reverb on the end of it. I will do that by going to Effects Modules, and let's go with Ghost Reverb. It's a little different. I'm going to set it to 2 in and 2 out, and I'm going to pick a ghostly color. So let's do this in order. We could see the first oscillator here. That is going to go into the first filter. The second oscillator is going to go into the second filter. The third oscillator is going to go into the third filter, and the fourth oscillator is going to go into the fourth filter. We can verify that this is happening by clicking the outputs of these filters and seeing a wave. So now the filter outputs will go into mixer 1. The second filter, mixer 2. I'm going to turn the gain all the way down on these mixer channels. I'm also going to divide up the panning. Now the left output of the mixer will go to the left input of the reverb. The right input of the reverb will go to the right output of the mixer. And finally, on the last page here, we will patch the output of the reverb to the output from the Euroburo into a digital recorder. Now we have all the envelopes to think about. So we have MIDI gate 1 going into the first envelope, MIDI gate 2 going into the second envelope, MIDI gate 3 going into the third envelope, and MIDI gate 4 going into the fourth envelope. Hopefully, these will all light up as I hit the keys. And they do. Now the CV output of the envelopes will control the amplitude of the mixer channels. And let's see if we did it. This one is very loud, so we're going to attenuate it. Maybe down to 50%, see how that sounds. This is crackling just a little bit, so I'm going to attenuate the mixer input from the filters down to 50%. So I have the MIDI priority on the first note. If I want to change the way that behaves, I can select the MIDI input module here, go to Edit, go down to Priority, and let's change it to something like Round Robin. That way it will always alternate. I've turned the reverb up a little bit, and now you'll notice that when we program Poly this way, everything sounds so much more organic and imperfect. I'd like to add to some of that organic imperfection. So the first thing I'm going to do is create some LFOs. And those LFOs can connect to each one of our oscillators. And they could all be different frequencies because, again, we're not doing this like a standard synth. We could do this however we want. So I'm going to start with a sine. Now I'm going to hold down the output of that sine and move it to the input of the oscillator, and then move it all the way down below 1%, maybe to 0.3. Now I'm going to copy that and paste it right over here. Do the same thing with this oscillator. This one may be 1.2%. I'm going to raise the speed of this LFO a little bit. That's a little extreme. I'm going to attenuate it down to 0.47. Finally, I'm going to find the velocity out of this MIDI module, and I'm going to have it control the cutoff on the filters. And now I'm going to close the filters down a bit because they don't need to be quite as open since we have them being modulated by the velocity from the MIDI controller. I've changed my mind on this filter, so I'm going to edit it and turn it into a low-pass filter like the others. Obviously, I have used only a very, very small amount of the effects, control, MIDI, etc. modules in this unit, but we've already opened up Pandora's box a little bit to see what can be achieved. That sounds so much different than a standard synthesizer when we make our own polyphonic synthesizer from scratch. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel. If there's anything you want me to cover in the future, let me know in the comments. If you want to join my Patreon with a whole bunch of unique perks and an awesome community, you can do so for as little as $1. See you later. Bye.